Hello and welcome to the latest edition of our webinar on sustainable dairy, global trends and Indian strategies. We are really delighted to have four great speakers with us. We have Dr. John Nyson. He's an international dairy expert. He has also worked in India before. We have Dr. Timothy Robinson. He's currently working with the Global Dairy Platform Dairy Sustainability Agenda. We would be having Dr. Inderpreet Kulla, who would join us slightly later, and we would also have Dr. Abhinav Gaurav from Environmental Defense Fund. Here are some house rules. Just make sure that you adhere to them. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask them in the Q&A section. Please keep yourself muted and also keep your cameras turned off. Okay, why are we even talking about this subject as of now? Because sustainability is very, very critical to the Indian dairy sector. Specifically at Jordbrukare, we see that sustainability has four elements. It has environmental element, it has financial element, it has nutritional element, and it also has social element. When we talk about environmental element, we are talking about how dairy impacts our environment, our ecology. But when we are talking about the financial element, and this is we have seen is discussed most in India, is because when we talk about sustainability, people are talking about financial sustainability and viability of their businesses. We also know if most of India is vegetarian and a lot of people rely on dairy for as source of protein, but we also have to understand the reality. A significant portion of Indian population relies on dairy for their livelihood. That also ensures that they have access to nutrition. And when we talk about the social element, this is the most critical element because this is about the social acceptance of dairy. If dairy is not financially viable, it's not environmentally so nutritionally acceptable, we would actually find it very challenging for our next generations to adhere to dairy and also keep continuing dairy. We are already finding it challenging that next generation is not willing to take dairying as a source of revenue for themselves. So we are very excited that we would be able to delve through all this with our speakers today. When we talk about the Indian context, we have around 300 million bovines living in India and producing a humongous amount of carbon dioxide. One thing that comes up most of the time through different studies, animals that are better yielding also produce less emissions. So I think when we are going through this topic, we would be talking to our experts on different ways and strategies and their experience on how to mitigate the emissions. Let me introduce you to our speakers. Our first speaker is Dr. John Nyson. John Nyson has global experience. He has also worked in India with one of the largest herd-sized dairy farms in India, and he would be walking us through with his expertise, and we would use him as a bridge to connect his global and Indian experience. Our next speaker is Dr. Tom Robinson. He's currently working with Global Dairy Platform and Dairy Sustainability Agenda, and he will share with us what is Global Dairy Sustainability Agenda, what they are doing, and also he would be talking to us about what projects they are currently doing in India with National Dairy Development Board. Our next speaker is Dr. Inderpreet Kaur. She's an associate professor, and she would also be joined by Dr. Hanish Sharma, who would be sharing his research on utilization of water in dairying and how can dairy be made more sustainable by reducing the water footprint. And lastly, but not least, our expert is Dr. Abhinav Gaurav. He's currently working as advisor of livestock management at Environment Defense Fund. I'm really excited to listen to him because he would be talking to us about the policy related changes that can actually help India become more sustainable in dairying. So with this, I would like to invite our first speaker, Dr. Timothy Robinson, to share his slide and walk us through what Dairy Sustainability Agenda is all about and what they are doing currently in India.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And it's a pleasure to come to talk to you today. My name is Tim Robinson, and I'm an advisor to the Global Dairy Platform. And I'm presenting today on behalf of Donald Moore, who is the Global Dairy Platform's Executive Director. and Brian Lindsay, who is the sustainability lead for GBP, and also the director of the Dairy Sustainability Framework. I'll be talking about global initiatives in sustainable dairying with a focus on DSF and the Dairy Sustainability Framework, that is, and the Pathways to Dairy Net Zero initiative. And I'd like straight away to acknowledge at this point that the DSF has 2 stage 1 membership pilots in India. There's the Jharkhand Milk Producer Federation in Jharkhand State and the Sharij Milk Cooperative in Andhra Pradesh. And these would not be possible without the support and leadership of the National Dairy Development Board of India. And to that end, I would like to thank Dr. Meena Shah, who's the NDDB chairman, for his direct support in these 2 pilots. It's nice to see that my definition of sustainability coincides very much with yours. This framework here was developed in 2018 by the Global Forum for Food and Agriculture in collaboration with FAO, where I used to work at the time. And we proposed a framework for understanding sustainability in livestock systems, and it condenses the SDGs into these 4 domains that are particularly pertinent to livestock systems. So we have food and nutrition security, livelihoods and economic growth, health and animal welfare, and climate and natural resource use. And this framework has been broadly adopted by not only GFFA but also by FAO, by the Global Agenda for Sustainable Livestock, and by the International Livestock Research Institute. So it's a useful framework that condenses the SDGs, and we like to think in terms of each of these 4 dimensions of sustainability, and they must all be really thought of in parallel rather than focusing on a particular item, to make sure there are no trade-offs that could cause problems in other areas. I think everybody here probably knows of the benefits of the dairy sector. Globally, there's 1 billion people strong involved, 600 million people living on dairy farms, an additional 400 million people supported in the industry, 240 million people employed directly or indirectly on 133 million dairy farms, and 37 million of these farms are led by women. And it's important to note that the Sharija Milk Cooperative of Andhra Pradesh is a woman-only co-op. So that's a nice example of how dairying supports women in particular. The value of dairy, it accounts for 20% of the world's agricultural lands, provides 5% of food energy, 10% of protein, and 9% of fat globally. And it's one of the most valued agricultural commodities worldwide. It ranks 3rd by production tonnage and top in terms of value of an agricultural commodity. So the Dairy Sustainability Framework looks at these sustainability criteria, and it's the sustainability monitoring and reporting framework for global dairy systems worldwide. The DSF vision is a vibrant dairy sector committed to continuously improving its ability to provide safe and nutritious products from healthy cattle, whilst preserving natural resources and also ensuring decent livelihoods across the industry. So that very much reflects those domains of sustainability I mentioned. DSF was launched in 2013. It's a global perspective, tracks the economic, social, environmental dimensions, and it currently accounts for about 265 billion litres of milk worldwide. So that's about 1/3 of global milk production and about half of all the formal milk produced in the world. So it's a widely used framework, and it's the way in which the dairy sector is addressing and reporting on its sustainability. It uses 11 indicators. This is the sort of annual report that that comes out of the Dairy Sustainability Framework. And if we just zoom in on one part of it, you can see the 11 factors there in that chart. And it's just worth pointing out here that greenhouse gas emissions is amongst those most highly prioritized. And that's important because that takes us onto the pathways to dairy net zero and so on. Now, it's quite a complex framework, but DSF has, with the assistance of the Global Dairy Platform and with IFAD, developed a lighter version of the Dairy Sustainability Framework. And this is being created building on learnings from a series of pilots, and some of those are listed up there on that slide. And these are developing a less burdensome reporting framework that can be used by organizations that are really just embarking on their journeys. And I mentioned that there are two of these stage one pilots in India, which have been possible and have received the direct support from the NWB chairman, Dr. Meena Shah. So the Jharkhand Milk Producers Federation, which was established in 2013. There are 550,000 farmers there and 145,000 kilograms per milk of milk per day going through that initiative. The other initiative is the other pilot is the Shrija Milk Cooperative. This is in Andhra Pradesh, established a year later, and it's about twice the size with 127,000 farmers. It's an all-woman producing group, as I said, and there are about 2/3 of a million kilograms of milk per day going through that system. I mentioned the importance of greenhouse gas emissions in the framework. And to focus on dairy greenhouse gas emissions, in 2018, GDP partnered with FAO and the Global Agenda for Sustainable Livestock, GASL, to analyse dairy emissions from 2005, 2010, 2015. And they found that during that time period, milk production increased by about 30% globally. The dairy herd increased by about 11%, and milk yields were up 15%. So overall emissions did increase by 18%, but emission intensities were reduced by about 11%. So efficiency was greatly improved. And without those improvements in efficiency, the overall increase would have been about 40%. So this was tracking improvements in the dairy sector, and that was a report done in collaboration with FAO. A few facts on emissions to keep in mind are that the dairy sector represents about 2.5% of global emissions based on CO2 equivalents. 85 to 90% of the sector's emissions are pre-farm gate, so it's mostly on farm and in feed production. 80% of the emissions come from emerging dairy regions, and about 2/3 of dairy sector emissions are accounted for by methane. And methane is an important gas because it's very potent, but it's a short-lived climate pollutant. And about 8% of all, if you look at the graph on the right, 8% of all global methane emissions come from dairy systems. So it's important that we tackle methane, particularly in dairy systems. And this brings us onto the initiative, which is Pathways to Dairy Net Zero. The awareness resulted in several organisations pulling together in this initiative. It was conceived in 2020 and launched at the Food Systems Summit in New York in September 2021. Commitments from major industry partners were announced at the UN Climate Conference, COP26 in Glasgow in November 2021. It's a collaboration between Global Dairy Platform, the International Dairy Federation, ILRI, Dairy Sustainability Framework, the SCI platform, and the International Farm Comparison Network. So these 6 organizations have come together to bring this together. And we have the Global Research Alliance for Agricultural Greenhouse Gases as a knowledge partner, and we're also supported by the Food and Agriculture Organization. The objectives of Pathways is to systematically introduce or enhance climate action in global dairy systems. And again, that's based on these four domains of sustainability that I've mentioned earlier, to develop pathways for all dairy systems and to stimulate commitments and action amongst different dairy players. And the systems emphasis is really quite important here. So we're trying to come up with pathways that are very specific. Two different types of dairy systems, which are globally are very diverse. Now, this graph, I'll try and explain it as clearly as I can. It's a little bit complicated and involved. But along the side of the graph, we have, up the side, we have kilograms of CO2 equivalent per kilogram. So that's greenhouse gas emission intensity in dairy systems. And we have yield effectively along the bottom. So the higher yielding dairy systems, which are to the right of that graph, have much lower greenhouse gas emission intensities. They produce much less gas per kilogram of milk produced. Each point on this is a country, by the way, and this is FAO data. To the left of the graph, we have this tall tail where we see high emission intensities from low efficiency systems. And we can map this to different types of systems. So, for example, pastoral and agro-pastoral type systems, which are low input, low output, are to the left of the graph, and the very high input, high output efficient systems are to the right of the graph. And if we look at the profiles of emissions across these different systems, we can see that the red color there, which is enteric fermentation, much higher proportion of that is in the inefficient, low productivity systems. And in the higher input, higher output systems, a much smaller proportion of their overall emissions are from methane and carbon dioxide and N2O from processing and feed production are much more important. And there are different sorts of approaches that are relevant to tackling the greenhouse gases from these systems. So this is to illustrate really the great diversity of systems across the world, and that it's important to tailor what we're doing to the different systems to target specifically the types of emissions that are coming from those systems. So Pathways to Dairy Net Zero has two tracks effectively. It has a sort of high, an advanced dairy system track, and it has a more emerging dairy system track. And we're doing activities in both of these two tracks. So very briefly, just to let you know what's going on in the developed dairy economies, there are 4 tracks guide regional work in these economies, and there are globally 3 or 4 collaborative actions that are being carried out. And I'm not going to go into details. These are led by different organizations, but basically we're talking about things like carbon accounting, improving greenhouse gas emissions in dairy processing, tackling methane specifically, and also looking at animal nutrition and better ways of feeding animals. So these are 4 kind of pre-competitive tracks that are being led by different players in advanced dairy systems, and Pathways to Dairy Net Zero is supporting that. In emerging dairy economies, we are identifying early adopters from these economies. And we're working with the Global Methane Pledge, with Cornell University, FAO, GDP, and we identified initially 10 countries to approach as early adopters of Pathways to Dairy Net Zero. And between these, they represent over 30% of greenhouse gas emissions from dairy systems. So these 10 economies would, do account for a lot of greenhouse gases. And through the Global Methane Pledge and the US State Department, which is very supportive of the Global Methane Pledge, these countries have been communicated with and invited to join in this Pathways to Dairy Net Zero initiative. So in summary, we have countries that were contacted in Africa, the Americas, Asia, and together, as I say, they account for about a third of global emissions. And we're communicating with the Green Climate Fund, and we're in the process of developing programs, regional or national programs in these countries to tackle greenhouse gas emissions in the context of sustainability. So looking not only just at greenhouse gas emissions, but also looking at the role of dairy in sustainable development and also in adapting to climate change, as well as mitigating dairy's contribution to climate change. We're quite advanced in Africa in developing a regional program for East Africa, which includes Tanzania, Kenya, Rwanda, and Uganda. IFAD is leading that as the accredited entity for the Green Climate Fund. But FAO is heavily involved, Global Methane Pledge, Bain and Company, USAID, and the Global Dairy Platform. We have submitted a concept note to the Green Climate Fund, and we are initiating this global initiative that will leverage about $400 million to help communities boost livestock productivity whilst reducing methane emissions. We're in the process of developing a concept note in the Americas, in Latin America, so Uruguay, Costa Rica, and Colombia. The Development Bank of Latin America will be the accredited entity for that region. And this is still in a fairly early stage. The East African program, the concept note's been accepted, and the project proposal has now been more or less drafted. So that's quite advanced. In the Americas, we're really still in the discussion stage. And in Asia, we have started work in Pakistan, and we have got USAID involved, Global Dairy Development, the Global Dairy Platform. The National Rural Support Program is the accredited entity, and that will lead the development of a national program. We've had our first stakeholder meeting in Pakistan, and we will be developing a concept note in the coming months. So we're at that stage there also. These programs tend to have generic structure. They vary quite a lot from place to place, but really it's about four main areas of activity. It's about creating an environment, an enabling environment which allows investment, which encourages investment in sustainable dairy systems. It's about developing those sustainable dairy systems themselves, so reducing greenhouse gases, increasing resilience, and so on and so forth. It's about generating innovative financing mechanisms, taking advantage of loans and grants, and also keeping an eye on the carbon markets and so on to try and fund these initiatives. And then an important aspect is the learning through targeting and evaluation, so that we can continuously improve as we continue to develop these programs. So that's my summary now, and please do feel free to get in touch with the Dairy Sustainability Framework and the Pathways to Dairy Net Zero initiative. There's clearly a great opportunity, I think, for Indian dairy systems to come together in a national program for Pathways to Dairy Net Zero. So I would love to encourage that, help anybody in moving towards that, and encourage people here on the call to get in touch with Donald Moore and to work with the Global Dairy Platform to make that a reality. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Dr. Robinson. This was really a good brief about DSF Global Dairy Platform and what you guys are also doing in India. I have some question. I'm sure our audience would have some question, but we will keep these questions for the later in the session. Now, I would like us to move to Dr. John Nisen for his presentation. So, Dr. Nisen, I will share your presentation from my side.
Okay. Thank you.
And you just let me know whenever you want me to move to the next slide.
Okay. Okay. Good afternoon, good day, good evening, wherever you may be in the world. I could talk for hours on this, but I've got 20 minutes, so I better carry on quickly. Okay, next slide, please.
A second. Yep.
Okay, I broke down the sustainability in the dairy context into 4 key areas: financial sustainability, environmental sustainability, animal health sustainability, and animal welfare sustainability. And I'll comment on all those, and then I will finish off with the commenting on the relevance for South Asia as I see it. Just some background. I mean, I have been a scientist, and I've run dairy farms in 4 countries. And then I spent 5 years in India leading probably one of the largest dairy extension teams for a dairy company. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, financial sustainability. Dairy farms have to be profitable. And quite frankly, they have to be more profitable than other farms because they require higher investment. If that is the case, dairy production will expand. And if it isn't, it will contract. It's that simple. And we have excellent example in New Zealand, where 20 years ago, dairy farming became more profitable than sheep farming on the South Island. And a huge amount of land was converted from sheep farms to dairy farms. Now we are starting to see on the North Island where dairy farms are being converted to horticulture. Okay, so it's a constantly changing system, and innovation is required to improve efficiency and economic performance. You have to keep at it all the time. And I think the main focus has to be on improving yield and feed quality of forages and feeding practices to improve production and more importantly, reduce environmental impact. And that is the same in every country I have been in. Okay. The key is to identify profitable dairy production models. And these really require maximization of quality forage intake. That is the key. And then you can fill the nutritional gap between the cow's requirements, either with concentrate or in some countries like New Zealand, no concentrate, depending on the economics. But I must add that the specifics differ from location to location. There's no hard and fast rule that you can develop. And I have seen cases where New Zealanders started to develop dairy farms in other countries and strictly followed the New Zealand system. It didn't work. Okay, the economics is different. The forages grew differently. Next slide, please. I'm going to apologize for this slide, but it's the most boring slide you're going to see. And basically, with forages, okay, when you cut a perennial forage and you start to get regrowth, the regrowth is very digestible, very high quality, but the yield is low. And as time goes on, the forage increases in yield, but the quality goes down. And there is a crossover point, sort of the sweet spot, where you have to harvest that forage. And the key is finding that sweet spot. And again, that differs for every forage and every season. Sometimes forages grow faster, sometimes they grow slower. And then matching that to the cow's demand is, well, that's the trick. Okay. And that's where the concentrates can come in to feed, to supplement, and to make surpluses. Next slide, please. We get away from that boring slide. Okay, and I'll just on the financial, I'll carry on a little bit more on the Indian aspect later. Environmental sustainability. Okay, number one, nutrient management. Basically, nutrient runoff is a waste of money, and every farmer should be working to avoid it because basically they're just, well, as they say in New Zealand, they're pissing money away. Okay. Now, this is generally easier in confinement systems, as the effluent is stored and then applied when conditions are favorable. And I know in India, they're also looking at biogas generation from the stored effluent. That's not such an issue in New Zealand, Australia, or the US because of what they don't know what they'd use the biogas for. In grazing systems, the key environmental issue, nutrient management issue, is nitrogen management. The pastures are generally too high in rumen-degradable protein, and it has to be converted to the urea and passed out in the urine. Okay. And this, because of the concentration and the volumes, this then either leaches into streams or groundwater. Okay. And in New Zealand, this had led to the term dirty dairying because of the pollution it's causing, which is not really a reputation the industry wants to have. In the short term, we're working on targeted supplementation to try and reduce the protein concentration in the diet. But in the long term, plant breeders need to change breeding emphasis. Okay, and they have to develop lower protein forages and probably also root systems that are better at capturing nutrients. And I just want to add here, many farmers are very environmentally sensitive, and many are planting riparian edges around streams to prevent runoff, enable nutrient capture, and also encourage wildlife. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, mitigating greenhouse gas emissions. The focus right now in New Zealand, in particular, is to improve efficiency of production in order to reduce greenhouse gas emissions per unit of product sold. And this ties in with Dr. Robinson's graph, I think, quite well. For non-grazing cows in confinement systems, reducing methane emissions is becoming commercial. Products that reduce methane emissions are becoming commercially available. And it seems like every day something new is being discovered that can help to reduce methane emissions. So I see in the long term that, well, quite frankly, I don't think it's going to be that big a problem. I think once science is really focusing on it now, solutions will be coming quickly and rapidly, and there'll be more and more of them. Nothing is available for the grazing cow yet, and this is a bit of a problem. Trying to get something into a cow that eats pasture. Okay. Having talked to a couple of scientists who have worked with some of these methane inhibitors, the results have indicated that they can get dramatic reductions in methane production without any impact on production, dairy production, milk production, which is very good to know. Unfortunately, what they were using is a potential carcinogen, so it'll never be approved for market. But it does show that we can reduce the methane without impacting performance. Now, the one thing I do want to just mention is, okay, we talk about the greenhouse gas emissions from livestock, but we got to remember this is really recycled carbon. It's carbon from forage, carbon from grain. It's not really a net addition to the carbon in the atmosphere. It's not taking it out of the ground and pumping it into the air like the petrochemical industry does. Okay, and I've never seen any differentiation in that effect. And okay, I just want to mention one other thing. The perennial forages can dramatically increase soil carbon content. And we've seen that in New Zealand. I saw that in the US. And I would be fascinated to know from India's perspective, where they have some very high yielding forages, how much carbon can be sequestered into the soil from these forages. That would be a fascinating research topic. Next slide, please. Okay. Yes, the next area is animal health sustainability. And for the dairying in particular, it's mastitis treatment, mastitis control. Okay. I think in many ways we've sort of lost focus with our breeding because of antibiotics. I think we do have to remember in India, the dairy industry dairy production has occurred or has been going on for between 5 and 8,000 years. There were a lot of treatments for mastitis before antibiotics came around. Okay. So I think one of the things we have to do is breed cows with more resistance. I think we've taken our eye off the ball there. We have to make sure we reduce aflatoxin contamination of feed, as some of these are immunosuppressive, and feed prebiotics, which reduce somatic cell count. Okay, and these have been shown time and time again. And reduce reliance on antibiotics by developing non-antibiotic treatment for mastitis. Okay, and I've sort of given two examples here. Working in India, we started using ethnoveterinary treatments combined with frequent stripping of the infected quarter, and we got excellent results. Excellent results. And that work is continuing, and so it should. In New Zealand, the wearables, the collars, and particularly the intraruminal bolus produced by a company called SmackTech can detect mastitis 2 days before clinical symptoms. And if you catch it early, all you have to do for most infections except E. coli is treat with an anti-inflammatory. No antibiotics required. And we have seen farms now where they have reduced antibiotic usage by 80 or 90%. It's just incredible. Okay. Next slide, please. Okay, one of the things these wearables are doing is adding a huge amount about animal behavior. Okay. Okay, and I've mentioned already that the early detection of animal health issues is becoming accepted. And this is going to become more and more pertinent as AI-generated analysis of the data gets underway, which is some of the companies are doing. The diagnosis will become more refined. It's yeah, it's just amazing what data they are collecting. We have seen in New Zealand the transitioning of cows during calving is the nutritional transition from the dry cow diet to the milking cow diet can be greatly assisted by these wearables and the rumination times. Okay, and we can pick up problems much, much earlier. What we are seeing in New Zealand is that the algorithms were generally designed for confinement systems because most of these products came from the Northern Hemisphere. And they're not totally appropriate for grazing systems. In particular, cow behavior changes. If a cow is feeling unwell, there could be changes to their behavior before we start to see biological changes. And we could possibly detect health issues earlier, and this is not being captured. But one of the most important things these wearables have done is has demonstrated that heat stress is completely underestimated as an animal welfare issue. And we are seeing signs of heat stress in ambient temperatures of 23 to 25 degrees Celsius, particularly in the Holstein cow. And a lot of farmers are asking, what do we do? And right now, the experts are sort of shrugging their shoulders. We're not sure. Okay, so there's a fair bit of debate going on about that. Next slide, please. Okay, implications for South Asia. First of all, most of the dairying is done by small farmers. Okay, and for it to grow and be sustainable, it has to be profitable And the small farmer has to see the dairying as a more profitable aspect than their other agricultural enterprises. Small farmers basically have running 2 or 3 agricultural enterprises at one time. And it's just a simple business case. They make more money off the cow, they'll probably buy another cow. Okay. And the key to that, I believe, is growing and feeding quality forage. And it can be done. We did it with farmers, and we were very successful in it. Sometimes it takes a leap of faith for the farmers to start to take land out of growing crops to growing a forage for the cows. But once they see the advantage and once they start to get that regular payment from the milk returns and decreased feed costs, it grows like wildfire. Okay. The one thing we did find was the farmers tended to try and maximize yield as opposed to quality, and trying to get them to move down to the sweet spot that I indicated before was a challenge. And part of that also has to do with the fact that with the fodder sorghums, there is the issue of prussic acid. Okay, so they cannot actually harvest that in a too immature stage because they may get a sick cow. However, if they make silage out of it, the prussic acid disappears. Okay, improving production efficiency and adding methane inhibiting compounds to the concentrate feeds, which will be, if they're not already approved in India, will happen shortly, combined with the carbon accumulation in soils under perennial forages, I believe will dramatically reduce the carbon footprint of dairy production. Okay, but these things have to be captured in the accounting system, particularly that soil carbon. Okay. Ethnoveterinary treatment of mastitis should be strongly encouraged to reduce reliance on antibiotics. And in the future, this could be combined with early detection using some of the wearables. Okay. Just like the wearable technology right now is more designed for confinement systems, not totally designed for grazing systems, it's also not designed for the small farmer. And if we could develop the wearable technology, alter it so it was designed for the small farmer, I think that could be a huge win-win and could lead to what I call smart dairy extension. Basically, totally focusing on the cow, and almost all the farmers have phones, working with them in that way. Basically, individualized extension. And finally, from my experience, heat stress, as I said, is a major issue, particularly Holstein cows. I saw that in India as well. I believe that India has to start looking at breed crosses, similar to the Ghirlanda, which was developed in Brazil. And the breed crosses have to be developed in conjunction with small farmers to develop the breed that best suits the small farmer. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Nisen. I think you have definitely bridged the Western knowledge and like your experience in India. And thanks a lot for the last slide about the context in the South Asian region. Now we would move to our next presentation. While we are still waiting for Dr. Kuller to join, I would like to move to Dr. Gaurav. Dr. Gaurav, would be great to hear from you on your perspective about the sustainability in the Indian dairy sector, as well as to learn more about what your organization is currently working on.
Sure. So thanks, Prashant. I'll be sharing my screen. Give me a second. Is it visible?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. So, thanks, Prashant, and I'll be talking a little bit about Indian policy space, Indian government policy space in terms of sustainable dairy development and what's the long-term outlook of sustainable dairy dairy farming system in India. So I'll start with a little bit of a context setting for the dairy production system in India. Some of it has already been discussed by John and by Timothy as well. So India can be characterized by production by masses because close to 80 million dairy farmers, which are smallholder dairy farmers, contribute by producing smaller quantity of milk, and that makes India the largest milk producer in the world by producing 1/4 of the global milk production, closely followed by US, China, Pakistan, and Brazil. India produces twice the amount of the milk when compared to US, but with 10 times more number of dairy cattle, which means that we have a big productivity problem in India. However, dairy in India is beyond numbers. It is about livelihood for these millions of farmers and then nutritional source of nutrition, quality nutrition, I would say, for more than a billion population, because we are largely a lacto-vegetarian country. So milk is a source of quality protein and other nutrients. And this trend of increased consumption of milk and milk products are going to increase in the coming years, as projected in a study that it is going to increase by 38% between 2017 and 2027. And we can already see that happening. Now, where do we source our milk? And that's very important in terms of the policy decision one takes. So half of our milk comes from water buffalo, that is, and rest of the half comes from, or almost the half comes from buffalo, and half of it comes from cattle, whether it's indigenous, exotic, or the crossbred cattle. So half of our milk comes from buffalo, but then that half comes from only 100 million buffalo, whereas we have 200 million cattle. So it means that buffalo are the mainstay of our milk production system, and they are highly efficient milk producers. They are indigenous to India, so they are a very important cog in the wheel in terms of milk production. Now, my previous speakers and Prashant, you also mentioned about greenhouse gas emissions, the need of sustainability, global warming. So India is the third largest emitter of greenhouse gases. But if we look closer, India's per capita emission is less than 15% when we compare it with US. So our per capita carbon footprint is much lesser than United States, but still we are the third largest emitter. And when we look at the sector-wise emission, agriculture contributes to 14% of emissions in India out of the overall emissions. And out of the total methane emission in India, agriculture contributes at least 70%. And when we look at livestock, which is part of agriculture subsector, 89% of livestock methane comes from enteric fermentation, and part of it comes from manure based emissions as well. Now, why methane is so important, I think Timothy mentioned about this, that methane has a shorter half-life period, and it is 86 times more has a 86 times more global warming potential when compared to carbon dioxide. And that is what pushing the global warming that we are experiencing today. 1/4 of it comes from methane only. Now, if you look at this map, this is a regional map developed by FAO, and that takes us to that in each region which species contribute to how much of emissions. And you'll see that in West, in even sub-Saharan Africa and parts of East and Southeast Asia, most of the emission comes from beef cattle. But in case of South Asia, most of it comes from milk sources, and that too, buffalo contributes almost 40% of GHG emissions, or methane emissions, I would say, out of the total pie. Now, if you look at the map closely, none of the other countries have buffalo emissions so higher when we compare it with India. It is close to 40%, and for the rest of the world, or if we take the contribution of emission from buffalo, it's only 13%. But for South Asia and specifically for India, it's close to 40%. So buffalo has a larger share in milk production as well as in emissions. Now, these two slides, I wanted to use them as a context that it creates a vicious cycle let me take you to the next slide. That is, emissions are there, and these emissions are pushing global warming, and this global warming is pushing for climate change. Now, climate change means more intense weather events, more hotter, drier spells, incessant rain in a smaller period of time. So these tendencies in climate are can be termed as climate change, and it has a huge impact on livestock health, welfare, health, productivity. A study published in Lancet has showcased that milk production can reduce in India by 25% by 2085 because of climate change, because of increasing temperatures. Another study that is of Indian origin has projected that around 3.4 lakh tons of milk production losses because of increased temperature, and in value it will be close to 15,000 crores by 2030 in the northern plains because of increased temperature, reduction in milk production. And that northern plains closely account for 30% of total milk production in India. So, and beyond production, if you'll see that increasing heat is also impacting the natural mating behavior, reproductive efficiencies of our cattle. It is more pronounced in the lactating cattle than the drier cattle, which means more production losses. And if we look at buffaloes, they are much more vulnerable to climate change and to increasing temperature. They're more susceptible because of their black skin, because of their thick skin, because of deep-seated and lesser number of sweat glands, less body hair. They are more susceptible to climate change and increasing temperatures. According to a study in 2013, the losses could be up to 20 to 30% per lactation cycle. So this gives us an interesting scenario where buffaloes are our mainstay of production. At the same time, they are most vulnerable to climate change and increasing temperature. There are indirect impact as well of climate change on livestock production system, like our pasture composition is changing, our water availability for our livestock is reducing, fodder production is getting compromised, and at the same time we are having newer diseases, increased intensity of disease attacks, pest attacks, parasite stress is there. So this gives an interesting situation for us where the livestock and agriculture space sector is pushing faster and more intense global warming potentials and climate change, and at the same time climate change is also impacting our livestock based production system. So it becomes a vicious cycle where your livestock and livestock numbers are pushing for more and more climate change, and the climate change is impacting our overall production system. So to break this vicious cycle, a sustainable dairy management protocol and practices has to be adopted. I'm taking here a strategic framework which EDF follows, and it was developed by FAO sometimes back. It was the strategic sustainable agriculture production system, and I've used that for dairy space, where there are four better has been proposed that a production system can be called sustainable when it ensures that we optimize production, we ensure that everyone's food security and nutritional security is ensured, when we ensure that the people who are engaged in the sector have benefit from the inclusive in economic growth, and at the same time I think John was also mentioning about that economics is very important, so that has to be ensured, and at the same time better environment, where environment has to be protected, restored, and promoted through sustainable use of production systems. So these four betters has to be ticked off for a sustainable for a system to be called sustainable. Now, how to achieve this? Can growth and sustainability go hand in hand, or whether there are any trade-offs that has to happen? So so there is this study which was done by, I guess, FAO, and then it was later carried on by Gerber, and Timothy was mentioning about this as well. So in 2010 there was a study that was conducted to find out that it was a life cycle assessment study was conducted on the milk production, processing, and transport systems, where throughout the life cycle of milk, how much is the emission per kg, or emission intensity, how much of it is. So in the average the average emission intensity is 2.4 kg carbon dioxide equivalent per kg of fat and protein corrected milk. So like for per liter of milk production, 2.4 kg of GHG or gas emission that happens, so in a layman term. But when we look at this figure more closely, then it is a range where 1.3 kg is the least of the emission and 7.5 is the highest emission per kg of milk. And more more efficient production systems like in the Europe, in the West, the emissions were on the 1.3 kg side, were on the lower side, whereas in more inefficient production systems like in Sub-Saharan Africa, South Asia, the emissions were more on the higher side, where it was towards 7.5 kg of carbon dioxide equivalent emission per kg of milk. And it was also seen that emission, where this emission is happening within the supply chain, it was happening largely at the farm gate level or at the production level. So we have to, the bottom of the problem is that within our production system, most of the emission happen, and and more emission happens where the production systems are inefficient. So close to 90 to 99% of emission happen at the farm gate level in developing regions, whereas in the more dairy developed nation, it's systems, it's like 80% of total emission happen at the farm gate level. Now, a second study, or to take this study, to take these learnings forward, the study was further processed, and Timothy was kind of mentioning about that. And in this figure, you can see that as the production starts growing from 1000 kg per year to 9000 kg per year, the emission intensity started dropping quite drastically. So we can see that sustainability and growth can go hand in hand. Rather, if we use our systems more efficiently, if we use our resources more efficiently, and if we improve productivity sustainably, the emissions will go down. So this is like, and there are strategies that exist in the current world which we can adopt to reduce emissions. So it can be divided into three larger parts, like how we manage our animal and our feed sources, what kind of diet formulation and altering the diet formulation to improve the digestibility, to improve the feed quality, and manipulate the human microflora so that lesser and lesser methanogens are there, so that lesser methane is produced. So it largely talks about how you manage. Animal management is about how you improve the health or the sustainabilities, four or five sustainabilities that my previous speaker was talking about. How you keep animal welfare at the center of it, how you manage the breed, how you manage their health, how you manage the temperature, humidity index. And humidity is a big killer in India. It is one of the major issues. Temperature is there, but it is getting lot humid in the current scenario. So how we manage temperature, humidity index, how we ensure better quality forages in the forages, how we improve its quality, how we increase concentrate ratio, add minerals and trace minerals and oil into their feed, so that they get quality feed sources, and at the same time through feed additives and through defaunation and other additives, how we can manipulate the rumen so that they can produce lesser methane. So there are several strategies that exist in the current world. However, in India, we have a unique scenario. We are a smallholder based or production by masses kind of a phenomenon that we follow. So we cannot adopt all these practices. We have to, India should chart its own course in terms of tackling emissions at the same time for furthering the sustainable dairy development goals. So government in last year has mentioned this, that agriculture emissions are survival emissions for India, and these are not luxury emissions. So whatever solutions that India make, we should be mindful that we are dealing with the lives and livelihoods of millions of people and nutritional security of billions of people. So we cannot take any rash steps which can jeopardize their health, well-being, and economic well-being of these people. So agriculture, so in this context, that agriculture emissions or livestock emissions are survival emissions, government has undertaken a lot of steps and policies, like building capacity of stakeholders through KVKs, Krishi Vigyan Kendras, to build their capacity on climate resilient practices. Through National Livestock Mission, they came up with like some of the strategies I mentioned before on breed improvement, ration balancing, green fodder production, silage making, all which has been proven that can improve productivity and reduce emissions. I see ICAR, in Council of Agriculture Research, also initiated national NICRA project, in which they have identified certain technologies which can promote heat tolerance and disease tolerance, or can identify genetic traits that can lead to heat tolerance in the cattle, and at the same time improve their resilience to climate change and mitigate emissions. The need is how to take these learnings and then scale it up across India. Uh, Now, biogas, though manure emissions are not high, but Government of India has also initiated Govardhan Mission and National Biogas Mission. Through that, they are trying to harness the emissions from manure and then use it for clean energy production at farm and household level. So there are a lot of steps that Government of India is taking on its own, and there are policies, but then all these policies are should be looked at from the frame of survival emissions and not luxury emissions. Now, we also have to understand that livestock, animal husbandry are a state subject. They are not a central subject. Center has its programs, but state also has to take up certain responsibilities. And some of the states like Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, Andhra Pradesh, Kerala, Goa, and some other as well, to lesser extent, UP, Punjab, and Gujarat has recognized livestock emissions as one of the issues, and have proposed steps or taken steps for sustainable dairy development in their state climate action plan. And these all are proposed interventions are basically from the lens of how we improve productivity through better quality fodder and feed availability, and improving resilience in our cattle rearing system. So these are largely around that only, but this shows that it's not only the central government, but some of the state governments have also recognized this challenge and are taking steps towards that. Um, Now there are certain, I would say, promising results that has came up early on itself, like ration balancing program that was introduced by National Dairy Development Board during NDP 1, National Dairy Plan 1. They come up with this. They came up with this ration balancing program, and it has shown that it can achieve the triple win. At EDF, we call it a triple win: when you improve productivity, when you safeguard the livelihood of the farmer, and at the same time it is climate friendly. So the ration balancing program has ticked all the three boxes, where there was reported reduction in enteric emission by 13.7%, carbon footprint of the milk reduced by 31.6%. In terms of profitability, farmer was able to, the income increase was there by 27 rupees per animal per day, and net income increase was like 11%. Uh, Second is like total mixed ration. It's an old concept, but in India it was a late adoption. NDDB, dairy cooperatives, large dairy farms are adopting TMR feeding now, and and studies have shown that TMR adoption leads to increased milk production, increase in milk fat percentage, and can reduce emissions by 11%. Now, feed additives are there, and these feed additives, as my previous speaker was talking about, that every day one new feed additive is coming to the market that claims that can reduce emissions. In India, two government institutions, NIANP, National Institute for Animal Nutrition and Physiology, and Tamil Nadu University for Veterinary and Animal Sciences, has developed products like Haridhara, Tamarin Plus, Tanvas Grand. So these products also claim to reduce emissions by 18 to 20%, and which is quite good. But these are early days. More rigorous research has to be done. More long-term impact of these additives have to be seen. And at the same time, what trade-offs are there while adopting these additives have to be studied more thoroughly in future. Now, these all are government programs, but then industry also has a role to play. And industry is a place where we see a lot of innovation happening, a lot of risk-taking ability is there. So globally, EDF has came up with Dairy Methane Action Alliance. It's an alliance of like-minded partners. It was initiated last year and was released during COP28 in Dubai. And we have 8 signatories: Danone, General Mills, Kraft Heinz, Lactalis, Nestle, Bell, Clover, and Starbucks. So this alliance is about methane action, is bringing accelerated action and ensure accountability on methane action across the dairy supply chain. In this initiative, these 8 signatory companies, and we hope more will join, will annually account for and publicly disclose the methane emissions within their supply chain, and then publish and implement comprehensive methane action plan. And EDF and another sustainability partner of ours, Ceres, will work with these companies, will assist these companies throughout this journey. At the same time, will seek accountability as their plans are implemented. But these plans are for the global north, as we say. But then we are working with these companies, to those who are operational in India as well, that how to plan for certain measures for smallholder farming system as well. And we are working closely with them in developing those solutions. However, I'll say that in Indian dairy industry in itself is a very vibrant space, and we need to learn and keep a close eye and document these practices that are happening within the Indian private sector dairy space or Indian industry dairy industry space as well. National Dairy Development Board recently, Dr. Manish Shah shared his vision of NDDB's vision of net zero dairying in India by 2050, and he gave a mantra that sustainability with efficiency and effectiveness, which basically sums up my entire presentation. Then we also have example of Banas Dairy joining hands with Suzuki to establish 5th biogas plant that can promote rural mobility using biogas. That's a welcome step where we are trying to counter emissions on 2 fronts. One is use of fossil fuel for our mobility, at the same time mitigating manure emission and harnessing it for good. Akshakalpa, South India based organic milk producer, has joined hands with Samunnati and British International Investment to finance smallholder dairy farmers to transition from current or traditional dairy management practices to more organic and regenerative farming practices. Milkimist, Tamil Nadu-based dairy company, has under its climate smart dairy ecosystem program, recirculates 90% of its water and is already a power surplus company. And similarly, Sabarkantha Dairy with Tetra Pak has developed or has piloted a cow shed. A cow shed design that uses the recycled carton that can reduce thermal stress by 5 to 6% reportedly. Nestle in its biodigester project has installed 70 large and 3,000 small biodigesters, and Moomark, which is a part of Stella Apps, became the first private dairy company to offer heat index-based insurance system. At the same time, we have Milma in the south, in Kerala, who has came up with similar heat index-based insurance plan this year. So it's a happening space in India as well, but we need to document these learnings and try to replicate them, try to scale up the really good ones. Now, to conclude this whole thing, and I'll conclude it very briefly, is that we should stop looking for silver bullets to arrive, that one day one product will come and will help us taking away all the emission issues and will boost the productivity automatically. In India, we have certain solutions that exist, and we need to work on those solutions with our farmers, because the farmers are the best veterinarians, are the best managers, are the best policymakers. They make their policies based on available resources on a daily basis. So we should work with them. And we all talked about access to quality fodder feed, but we also have to be mindful that as a nation we are deficit in green fodder, dry fodder, and concentrates, and these are large numbers, but at a farmer level these are survival questions. So we have to work with the farmers to find out what are the possible working solutions, and we have the strategies. Let's work on those strategies. We have some of the products that can help us in reducing emissions. So how to help these research institutions to take further leap from research and development to validation, and then scale up their implementation efforts. So in short, we have to work with large variety of partners, with diverse set of partners and stakeholders, and come up with more lasting solutions which can help us with variety of dairy farmers. We have large farmers, smallholder farmers, medium farmers working across length and breadth of country under different agroecological zones. So it takes a lot of effort from government and from all the sectors to come up with solutions that can last and sustain on its own. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Gaurav. Thanks a lot for a very elaborated presentation. And I think it also sums up a lot of challenges that are being faced by the country as of now. And like you have also proposed few solutions that can definitely aid to those challenges. Now we would like to move to next presentation from Gadwasu. We have Dr. Hanish Sharma. Dr. Gaurav mentioned Milky Mist about and that they are recycling every bit of the water that they're using. Dr. Sharma is currently working on water footprint of dairy sector. Dr. Sharma, are you there?
Yes.
Welcome to the webinar, Dr. Sharma. You can share your presentation now.
Is it visible?
Yes. We are seeing the yeah, now it's, you can, yeah, it's good.
Hello, everyone. Good evening to all. I'm Dr. Hanish Sharma, working as a postdoc fellow at IIT Ropar. I've done my PhD on water footprint analysis dairy sector in Punjab. Unfortunately, my advisor, Dr. Inderpreet Kaur, was here to present this presentation, but she could not be there due to some unforeseen reasons. So I'm giving her, on her behalf, I'm giving this presentation. During my PhD research, I have worked on the water footprint analysis of milk processing industry. And I have worked on the whole channel of the dairy sector of Punjab, and from the farm level to the milk processing level. In this presentation, I will discuss about the milk processing industry water footprint in Punjab state. Presentation will be covered on the introduction, methodology, what are the findings of the results, and what are recommendations for the future. It will discuss. Like we all know, India is the world's largest milk producer, but 54% of the area is also under high water stress. And if you look at the Indian scenario, most of the largest milk producers are in the northern western part of India, like Punjab, Haryana, Rajasthan, and western UP. And this is the same area which was the hotbed of the water stress also, and the same area where in the 1960s and 70s the green revolution took place during that time. And there is an area called Punjab here, from where I have done the study. It's an area which is ranked 7th in the entire nation, and in terms of milk production, and it's contributing 6.4% to the national milk pool with just 2.2% of the total bovine population. And currently, Punjab's 70% area is under, more than 79% area is under highly water stressed. And in the last 2 or 3 decades, the monoculture of paddy and wheat has changed this situation a lot, and it has affected the groundwater level a lot in the last 2 or 3 decades. So, to overcome this challenge, there is a need to shift towards the other sectors also now, and dairy could be one of the dairy, which is contributing right now 40% to the total agriculture GDP of Punjab, could be one option. For that, we need to understand that how much water is being consumed in the dairy sector of the Punjab. So, with this question, we carried out this research. If we look at the milk production scenario of Punjab, milk processing scenario, around 36.6 million liters per day is the domestic milk production of Punjab, out of which 52% is market surplus, and out of which 44% is going to the organized sector, and out of that 29% is going to the cooperatives, and 71% is going to the private milk plants. And thus share is quite less in India right now, because in the developed nations, it is like in US and European nations, it is going 90% to the organized commercial channels. If you look at what is the groundwater availability and utilization pattern in Punjab, you can see that around 160, around 97% of the water is being consumed by the crop sector. That is for the irrigation purposes there. And around 3.41% water is being consumed for the domestic and industrial usage. And we are overdrafting the water. That is 166% of the total water which is available, and we are overdrafting much more than that. So the situation is becoming much and more grim in the coming years also. But what is the major uniqueness of this study? It's the first time attempt in South Asia to analyze the water footprint of milk processing in dairy plants. Assessment of indirect water footprint in the milk processing was done for the first time there. Region-specific focus on water availability and utilization in the state was done. And it is the only study where the time series data of 5 years has been analyzed for the purpose of the water footprint in milk processing. If you look at around 9 plants from the state were selected across the length and breadth of the state were selected for the study. From these plants, 5 years data from 15 to 19 was collected from these plants. And the seasonal milk procurement, like in India, we can say it's a lean and flush season. In lean season, the milk production goes down, and in the flush season, the milk production increases. So we have calculated data on the seasonal basis there from these plants. And the seasonal product mix also we calculated from there, collected from there, like liquid milk, dahi, ghee, butter, milk powder, ice cream, and milk cake. We collected from there. And the monthly water and energy use data was also collected from these plants also. If I look at how was the water was flowing in these plants, if you look at the major source of the water drafting was the blue water, that is the groundwater, that is which is being stored in a water tank. It is being transferred to for all the activities like for the state like office water supply, laboratory, milk tanker, and liquid milk processing, and service section and floor cleaning also. From these, our water is going for the other activities like air cooling, drinking, sanitation, cleaning, and for the other activities, milk packaging. And if you look at and then it is some of the water is being going on as a effluent, and some of the water is being being consumed as a evaporative loss, and which is in some plants it was being used as in the form of a condensate in the form of condensate in milk tanker cleaning for the floor cleaning activities. If you look at around 74% of the water is being going to the effluent in these plants, and around 26% was being consumed in processing activities in these plants. If you look at how we have calculated these terminology, direct water usage, we have calculated the total water usage with the milk process. Then its direct water footprint was calculated, the total water consumed in processing activities to the milk process. That the indirect water footprint, that is water consumed in generation of electricity to the milk process. Then the total water footprint was calculated, the direct water footprint and summation of indirect water footprint was calculated. If you look at the plant-wise water footprint, if you look at the direct water usage, if we see, was highest in the X6, X7, and X8 plant on an average of 1.3.34. And if you look at the direct water footprint, if you look at that is a 0.95. And if you look at it was highest in X6, X7, X8 plants. If you look at the indirect water footprint, that is in terms of energy, that was also highest in the X6, X7, and X9 plants. And if we look at the total water footprint of the milk processing, it was highest in the X7, X6, and X9 plant. It was found to be 8.99. Around 90% of the total water footprint is being comprising of the indirect water footprint, and around 11%, around 10% it was direct water footprint. Variation was in water consumption per kg of milk process was best explained in the larger plant, and energy consumption it had a major impact on the water utilization in milk processing at these plants. If you look at the seasonal impact of these of water footprint, if you look at in these plants, the milk procurement during the summer season and in the winter season, if you look at that, there was in summer it was less milk processed, and during the winter it was more. If you look at the water footprint level was also low during that in the winter season and in the summer season. If you can see, there was a if there was an increase of, if you look at the 2016 to in 17, there was an increase of over around 3 times milk processed, and the water footprint was came down to around 30% during that time. It was also found out that if the milk is being more processed, then the water footprint can be definitely come down during this part. If you look at the product-wise milk share, we look at how much milk is being processed and how much milk is being consumed, is being used for the liquid milk activities or the other milk products. Like if you look at the around more than 80% milk is being processed for the liquid milk in these plants, and around 10 to 20% it was there. If you look at the water footprint also with that, if you look at this plant, if it in the 2017 was a year when the milk processing was higher in these plants, so and the share of the milk products also increased. The water footprint came down heavily during these plants this year. If you look at the product mix of all these plants, if you look, you can see that the X6, X7, X8, X9 plants, these are the plants which are having the higher water footprint, and these are also plants which are having higher share of the milk powder also in these plants, and which led us to look at the what are the major products which are having impact on the water footprint in these plants. That came out of, if we apply the principal component analysis on these plants, on the products on the basis of the water footprint, it was found out to be the milk powder had a major impact on the water footprint in these all the plants, and followed by butter, ghee, and liquid milk there. If you look at the groundwater situation of the state and its impact on in these plants, all the plants which have been in Punjab were situated in the overly exploited zone, having more than 100% of the over water utilization. And if you look at the around 26% is being water is being consumed by these plants, and 74% is going as an effluent in these plants. And if we look at the total overall picture, these plants are consuming 0.13% of the total water which is being drafted for the industrial and domestic level, and these plants are consuming 0.48% of the total water usage for the activities for the industrial and domestic level. If you look at the projected total water usage for all the plants in the Punjab milk segment, if we extrapolate that came down to around 2.27% of the total water usage for these plants. These are the projections we have done for the future. If we have looked at that, as the share of the dairy industry is going to increase in future, these projections will definitely help us to establish establishing new plants, that how much water will be consumed, and if we have to increase our utilization capacity, if we increase this much of capacity, that this much of water will also we have to consume and use for these activities. If we last at the conclusion, if I came down to total water footprint of milk processed was found out to be 8.99 liter per kg of milk processed. 90% of total water footprint is contributed by the indirect water footprint. Dried milk plants had higher water footprint, was found out to be like the X6, X7, X8 plant, which are having the larger share of the milk powder, which are also the major contributor for the water footprint. Dairy plant-wise product profile needs to be rationalized. That is the one thing, that which are the plants which are having higher water footprint and also having the products which are like milk powder there, and which is impacting the water footprint of this plant. This should be shifted to the other plants which are having a lesser water footprint. So rationalization should be there for the product profile in these plants. 73% of the total water footprint is going to the ETP as an effluent there, and this needs to be recycled for the milk tank and floor cleaning activity. Some plants are using it in this area, but not much. It needs to be intensified for these activities. Organized sector share in milk procurement is bound to increase, so the water usage projections are in need of the hour. We have to do this to first for installing new plant, we need to know at how much water we are going to use or consume for the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Sharma. Thanks for sharing your insights and like findings from your research work on the water footprint from Punjab. I definitely have some questions. I'm sure our audience would also have some questions. So now we have like gone through the presentation on Global Daily Platform. Then we have like also Dr. Nisen talk about the New Zealand and also doing a comparison with India. Dr. Gaurav has done like a presentation on what is currently being done by Environmental Defense Fund and also like some of their observations from India. Dr. Sharma has shared about the water footprint. Now, after concluding that, we come to the next session where it's a short roundtable. As we are already overshooting with the time, I would like to have a very like go through some questions from our audience, and like I also have few questions. I have my first question to Dr. Robinson. Dr. Robinson, as of now that we are aware, EDF is working in India with NDDB. We would be very keen to understand what is your current observation and how different you find some of your findings from or your work from, let's say, other developing regions and like as compared to India. Do you see any difference in the practices, and are those practices actually leading to emissions?
Well, I'm afraid I don't have much experience with dairy systems in India, but I think they're probably very similar to the situations we have in Pakistan.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of smallholders, about half coming from buffalo production and so on. I think heat stress is probably a very important factor there as well. I think there are a lot of parallels between the East African program, smallholder systems, for example, in the highlands of Kenya, compared to the systems here. So I think there's probably a lot of transfer that could be made across the two dairy systems. The key is bringing the private sector in, I think. And not relying on government interventions. So bringing private sector investment through, demonstrating that profit can be made by doing things in a more efficient way. And I think it's been said often enough, the first step here really is about increasing efficiency. And if you can double the efficiency, you can halve the emissions from the same amount of milk produced. It's as simple as that, isn't it? So where systems are inefficient, that's the obvious way forward, isn't it? And it's only when you've got efficient systems in place that you can start to think about things like methane inhibitors and so on, to start chipping away at specific emissions that are coming from from more efficient animals.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Robinson. My next question is with Dr. Nisen. Dr. Nisen, you talked about intrinsic emissions and the role of the fodder that is going in. I have a question regarding, like, we did a small session 2 years ago, and we were discussing with the dairy processors and the farmers about a few of the challenges or one of the challenges that we found was among the management practice was the access to water. And that was actually keeping the yields pretty low. What do you think, like if we weigh water availability that can easily be resolved versus feed fodder availability that are, I would say, like slightly difficult to cater by local farmers or smallholder farmers? What do you think, like how do you say which one holds more value when it comes to intrinsic emissions?
That's a question. I mean, we struggled with this issue about first of all, water usage. There was, I think, a slide that said about 97% of the water was used for irrigation and 3% in the irrigation of crops and fodder has to be severely looked at. And we were trying to do that. And there some plants, if they get drought stressed, die. So they need irrigation. And some of this the pennisetum, the super napier and stuff, that's what happens. So they can only grow in irrigated areas where there's plenty of water. But in other areas where there is a water shortage, they have to look at the more drought tolerant sorghums, which some of the perennial sorghums are actually will stop growing during the dry season, but then once water is applied, they'll grow again. Okay. But then the small farmer needs a way to be able to harvest that during the monsoon to feed to the cows during the dry season. And that is one of the key issues. And it's one that India has to face very, very soon, because I was in villages where about every 2 or 3 years they had to deepen the wells because the water table is dropping so rapidly. That cannot go on. And it's a very, very important issue, and probably in many ways one of the most crucial sustainability issues for South Asia.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, my question was about access to water for cattle, because I have seen
Oh,
situations
yeah.
where cattle do not have access to water 24 hours. They generally
Oh,
are given water 2 times in a day or 3 times in a day.
no.
If you have more access to water, will that actually lead to reduction in emissions? Because then you have better yields
Yeah. Yes,
immediately.
yes, you will. Just because the cow will be happier. I
Yeah.
mean, a lot of the inefficiency is due to reproductive inefficiency. Okay. And if the cow is happier and satisfied, they reproduce easier.
Yeah.
It's that simple. Okay. So yes, it will improve efficiency. And water is considered the most important nutrient for an animal, for anybody.
Yeah.
Okay. You can go without food for a few days, but you cannot go without water.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, definitely. It does.
Yeah.
Dr. Gaurav, my next question is to you, because I also read the report that you wrote, and you have also mentioned in your presentation about Lancet review, and then you have also done this news piece that I read about India losing on milk. One thing that is a harsh reality, we would definitely have hotter days in the coming years, and we would have more humid days as well. What do you think? What in that particular situation, as a country that is low on a water table, that is struggling with other issues? What is your take? Like, do you think India is actually poised to become or retain this position of number one producer? Also, if you see the projections from the government or government agencies, they plan to be producing more than 500 million metric tons by 2050. So, like, what is your take on that?
So I am an optimistic person. I would start with that. So, we are poised to produce 1/3 of global milk. Then that is going to happen, and that is like beyond, say, because that's a function of numbers. We have number of animals. Then Europe is coming up with more carbon taxes and more aggressive carbon taxes on agriculture and livestock, and that will also impact some of the larger farms that is there. So we are poised to remain number one, and also become 1/3 of milk producer, world milk producer. But then the problem is how you achieve that, and how you retain that, and how you sustain that, and in that process how you work with your smallholder farmers. The problem here is that our potential is to go beyond that, just not 1/3, because if these inefficiencies will be worked out, our production level can grow up. And I'll pick some of the points that John was talking about. So about fodder, it's not only growing fodder, and fodder is going to be important, but then you'll have to see that then there is a trade-off, that if a farmer has to produce fodder, there is a competition for land, because he's a smallholder farmer or she's a smallholder farmer, and either he or she will grow wheat and rice in that land, or will grow fodder crop. That is a trade-off. Then it is about water, whether the farmer will feed the cow better and will give more digestible fodder and will give enough water, or will he or she will look for water for his or her own consumption? We have seen this summer what happened in Bangalore. We'll also see that more and more farms which are peri-urban in nature will be under stress because their access to easy fodder, easy water, that days will no longer be there. So these are going to be very difficult days. More than heat, we should be wary about the humidity. We have already seen that how heat is impacting the mating and reproductive behavior of buffaloes, and we see like infertility issues up to 30% silent heat, and I'll go on and on about that. So these are going to be difficult days, and if we have to remain on track with higher milk production and remain number one, and then we'll have to think about our breeding policies. Which traits to be followed? Should we still follow the 60s or 70s formula of identifying high productivity traits, or should we look for traits which are beyond that, which are more heat resilient, disease resilient? So there will be a lot of, I'll say that this space is going to be a lot more interesting because we are again not very ready for some of the dairy farmers or a lot of dairy farmers to transition from dairy farming and leaving dairy farming and getting a job. So they'll remain a dairy farmer. So how to support them in the longer run? That's going to be a challenging time, but I'm optimistic we'll remain number one for coming days.
Yeah. I think one of the questions, I was recently at a conference in France, and I was asked a question, why so many Indians as like why India has a lot of small holding farms. And for me, I think one of the foundational reason for having us having a lot of these farms, because like government also does not know what if these people would stop farming, what would they do? So it's also about ensuring a job, and that job is also ensuring them a bit of a nutrition. At least like nutritional sustainability is actually one of the challenges. Um, Thank you, Dr. Gaurav. Dr. Sharma, I have a question from you. In your research, when you started your presentation, you talked about the reason for you to conduct this study was to understand how you would see, or do you actually see any because of the water footprint, any transition from traditional crops, so wheat and rice, towards agriculture and dairy, and that happens to be very contrary to what we have. Other people have been talking about people quitting dairy just because there is not enough water. So, how do you see that? Like, and when you concluded your study, what did you find? Did you find that there is a significant difference between per hectare of rice or wheat grown versus per kg or per certain amount of milk that is being processed?
If you look at the full water footprint of the dairy sector I have studied for Punjab, it was found to be it was way less than the paddy. I can tell you.
Okay.
It was way less than the paddy, around 50%. It was around if for growing 1 kg of paddy, we need around 2000 kg, a liter of water. We need, and which was much more less for 1 kg of milk. Much more less.
Yeah.
If I tell you, including processing, I can tell you, and processing is one of the major part of the milk production. If you see, so it is I think dairy could be one of the much more sustainable alternative for the paddy in the future. If we go much more in this research, in this area, or much more research should be done in this area, I think dairy could be the one that could help us to overcome this water challenge for future, like in place of the paddy, because if we are having a short income also for farmers here, right? So it could be one.
Yeah, thank you. Dr. Robinson, my next question is to you. When we talk about sustainability, and one of the, like us being coming from dairy sector, we are all generally criticized by the vegan and other sectors, or the precision fermentation segment, that we are not very sustainable. And one of the things that I personally believe, and I think like John and Dr. Gaurav, you can also add to this. I personally feel that we are always behind the narrative game. We are not able to portray, because like there's a very good story about nutritional density of milk. Like when it compared per gram of nutrition delivered, I think dairy stands significantly at par or even beyond what other alternatives are able to provide. What is your take? Like, why are we struggling to share our narrative with our consumers?
I think the vegan movement, for the obvious example is with all the milk alternatives, oat milk and so on, and they have very, very aggressive marketing strategies and not always completely honest and transparent reporting on the emissions and the amount of processing that goes into the production of these products. But I think it's I think the strength of milk is in its nutritional quality, and I think really we should make more of an effort to promote that. So for me, milk speaks for its. It kind of puts its own arguments forward in terms of nutritional quality and accessibility of these vital micronutrients that are provided. So I think more could be done to sort of counter the arguments against it from environmental perspective. But the other thing is, what we need to do as an industry is to demonstrate that we're improving, and we acknowledge, rather than hiding away from the sustainability issues. We really need to show what we're doing to improve these things. And I do think the dairy sustainability framework and the pathways to dairy net zero programs are doing just that. So I think it's important to show progress and to be realistic about what the challenges are and what we're doing to overcome them.
Thank you. Dr. Nathan, my next question is with you, to you. You used the term individualized extension. When we specifically talk about Indian context where farms are extremely very small, you're actually talking about individualized extension. What role do you see of technology in enhancing that? Given, despite like a lot of people actually use mobile phones, but I have also seen a lot of tech companies failing in this domain, specifically in India. What is your take on that?
Okay. Well, we were probably one of the first companies that started using the Herdman ear tags. I don't know if you're aware of that, because, okay, when I arrived in India, I had a team of about 300 inseminators, but I had absolutely no idea what the conception rate was. Okay, how many times a cow was being bred? Nothing. Absolutely nothing, other than they were doing 10 inseminations a day. Okay, so we started with these QR code ear tags, recording everything. Okay, and we were just starting to build on that when COVID broke out. But already just with animal recording, an SMS can be sent to the farmer to say, look, your cow calved 3 months ago. She hasn't come into heat. Is there a problem? Right? And you can start to build on that. And also, look at their milk production and say, okay, your cow calved 2 months ago, but she's still only producing 10 liters of milk. Do you need some nutritional advice? And this can, with these wearables now, and actually individually recording, a lot of this can now be done virtually with AI automatically. And messages sent to farmers saying, okay, your cow is not ruminating enough. This is one of the things that happens here in New Zealand. Or your cow is hungry. Okay, you have to feed her better. It can be done. And I think it would be far, far more efficient than sort of the current extension system where you have meetings with farmers and you talk about things generically, which may be of relevance to several farmers in the room just because those cows are at that certain stage of the lactation or gestation or whatever. But then for a lot of people, it doesn't have any relevance. And by the time it is relevant, they've forgotten it because the meeting was 6 months ago.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have to put some thought into it, but I think there is a huge potential for very targeted extension. Okay.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Have I made myself clear?
Yeah, I think like implementation, like making
Yeah.
whatever advice is being provided, that has to be implemented. That is where the criticality is. One
Yeah.
of the challenges that I was talking about, there have been like few tech companies that came up, but maybe like the interaction, that kind of interaction that these apps needed from their farmers, that was not being delivered, or maybe like they needed to
Yeah.
change on the interface or something that would have resolved the problem. But somehow like tech hasn't like and I think it has to do more with the financial model,
Yeah.
because tech, they want to deliver or provide a free app to the farmer, but in return they expect so that farmer to punch in a lot of numbers, and this is what is not happening. But I think this is where
Yeah.
automation and tech can come in at play. um
Yes. And the farmer has to see that there is a financial benefit.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Makes sense, Dr. Nisen. Dr. Gaurav, while working with one of the businesses in India, we were talking about the sustainable milk, but it had a cost attached to it because, okay, conventional milk or gray milk was slightly cheaper and the green milk was slightly more expensive. And where do you see this cost actually sits? Because definitely consumer is pretty sensitive, okay, like about the prices, but businesses do not want to cater to that particular cost. They don't want to put into their P&L. Farmers shouldn't be charged for doing what they're doing. Where do you think, where does the cost sits as of now? Or do you actually see is the consumer that ultimately should pay for a greener milk?
So, you know, that's an excellent question, Prashant. So, uh, India, or milk or the whole dairy space is still very subsidized in nature, and even the private sector behaves in the subsidized model way because that's how the government has worked in this sector. That's how the cooperative systems are. So it's more of a philanthropic venture, and even the community with whom even the private sector is working with, the community still believes that the company should take dairy as more philanthropic venture. So it becomes and same with the public in general. They believe that the milk should come at a certain price and should not increase by a certain margin. So the whole model here is subsidized, socialistic model. So that's a problem. But then
Yeah.
to say that how we should where the cost should sit in, initially it has to come from the government, and then it has to go down through the private sector route, and slowly we'll also have to work on consumer awareness. I don't know how many of the consumer segments are aware about the amount of water, the amount of electricity, the amount of resources that goes on to produce a liter of milk for them. So we have to work on consumer awareness as well, that for each liter of milk, how much resources is going into it and how much we are actually paying for that. It will take some time, but we'll have to work on consumer awareness at that level. And it has to finally sit with the consumer if we have to sustain this trend. Um, there's also one more portion that we have to look at, is that private sector and cooperatives only cater to 40% of the market. Rest of the 60% of the market is still unstructured, and they are also on its own a big coterie in terms of what kind of milk should come in, how they perceive to be milk to be a quality milk, how they perceive it to be green, blue, whatever we can call it. So that's also one segment which only government can or has an access to till now through its animal husbandry department. So I think we'll have to work on larger level consumer awareness for a long time to actually make this cost shift to the consumer and to the board of directors of these private dairy companies.
Yeah, makes sense because so far, like at least like in the Indian context, we haven't talked about the consumer. We haven't talked to them about it. But I also see that younger generation is pretty keen to get more sustainable and resilient systems. So makes sense. Dr. Sharma, my question to you. You talked about when you were giving examples of different plants, you did mention plant X6, X7, X8, and X9. They were generally like more on like they were consuming more water. X9 at like in last two parameters. When then you you also mentioned that these were the plants that were actually producing powders or other kind of products. But when we see Indian dairy as a whole, we see that more and more commoditization of dairy would happen. That means we would have more and more plants that are producing high value ingredients. So definitely powders and other products would be coming in. So how do you see that? How will it change the overall landscape of Indian dairy? Do you see more water, like Indian dairy would become more will start consuming more water in coming days, or during your study you also found some studies where um, new technologies are coming in that are going to reduce the water consumption at the plant level?
These plants majorly consume the indirect water footprint, that is from the energy they
Yeah. Okay.
consume much.
Mhm. Okay.
So I think to tackle this problem, they should, I think, shift towards the renewable energy sources. That is the key of the hour
Yeah.
today.
Okay.
And I think if they shift it towards the renewable energy, then definitely the indirect water footprint will definitely come down. Because so I think that will make us much more environmentally sustainable, also dairy sector and milk sector also for the future.
Perfect.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you. I think like we are pretty much more on time. And before we close this session, I would like to come back to each of our speakers and just ask you one question. If you have to tell our audience one line about sustainability and your hopes for the coming decade, what do you see like Indian? How is dairy becoming more sustainable and resilient? Dr. Robinson, we start with you.
I think the evidence is quite clear that dairy is becoming more sustainable, and there's no doubt about that. And the pressure will build for us to become more sustainable further, particularly in the environmental dimension. So I think that the important message is to be frank about what needs to be dealt with, and to get on with it, and to measure and demonstrate progress. And I think by doing that, the dairy system has a bright future.
Perfect. Thank you. Dr. Nysen.
Well, yes, I agree. I think now that we have identified sustainability as a key issue and science starts to focus on it, we will solve the problems because they are solvable. Okay.
Yeah.
A lot of it was just lack of scientific attention up until now. Okay. But now that's changed. And we can see that already with the methane limiting products coming out or discussed or being researched for cows. Yes, it's happening. And it will happen. Not a problem.
Great. Dr. Gaurav?
Yeah, so yes, the future is bright and it's going to be sustainable. And partly my optimism comes from the onset of these new farms that are coming out by the younger generation. And this is a phenomenon that has came after COVID. So we see now lots of younger people, educated people opening up farms, and they are trying to create a product differential for them. They are trying to become more sustainable, they are trying to become more resilient, and at the same time create a name for their own dairy. So I see a very bright future, because these are the people who will become lighthouses in their state, in their region, and will bring change and will be more open to changes. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Gaurav. Dr. Sharma?
I think the future is very bright for sustainability in dairy. As the much more now masters, postgraduate and doctoral students are now these days are working on in this sector on water footprint and carbon footprint and for the future. But the need is that the results of these studies need to come for the public and for the government to look into these results, and what can be the recommendations from these studies can be done to improve the sustainability for this sector. Because I know the work is much more going on in this sector by the students, by the teachers there, and the professors are doing much more. But the need is the work needs to be go to the public now. We have to go to educate the farmers now, much more now. And
Okay.
that's
Thank you, Dr. Sharma. With this, I think we can conclude our session. I would like to firstly thank our speakers, Dr. Robinson, Dr. Nizan, Dr. Gaurav, and Dr. Sharma. And Dr. Nizan, thank you very much. It's pretty late for you in New Zealand still.
I hope I didn't yawn too often.
No, you didn't, but I did not realize that you were in New Zealand at this current point of time. I thought you would be pretty closer to India as of now, but thank you very much for staying up quite late. And I think our audience would have definitely found this session very interesting and intriguing. We try to take a lot of questions. If we have missed any question, please feel free to share it with us, and we would try to take them to our speakers and try to get you the answers. And with this, I would like to thank everyone who joined, and please stay tuned for our upcoming session next month. This would be about India producing 600 million metric tons of milk. What if it really happens? So with this, I would like to thank everyone again. Thank you very much. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
My pleasure.
Bye. Bye.